flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May we have the roll call?
Commissioner Roof?
Present.
Commissioner Iacopone?
Present.
Commissioner Duggan?
Present.
And for the record, Commissioner Bergman is out this evening. Chair Bradley?
Present. Thank you. Next item is public comment. Public comment is limited to items not on the agenda. The Commission may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed as allowed by the Brown Act. However, the Commission's general policy is to refer those items to staff for their attention or have a matter placed on a future Planning Commission agenda for a more comprehensive action or report. Are there any public comments? All right, we'll move ahead with the approval of the minutes of the September 17th, 2018 meeting.
Through the chair, staff would like to make an announcement to the Commission, which is that since the packet was released, we noted that there is a correction that needs to be made to the minutes to accurately reflect the Planning Commission's direction on their recommended floor area ratio. In the packet, the way that staff had presented the Planning Commission's recommendation didn't fully capture what was said, so I did provide on the dais, and there should be extra copies over at the public speaking request station, an amended version of the Planning Commission, of the minutes for the Planning Commission's consideration that has to do with FAR. And I apologize, I realize now there are not page numbers on the minutes, but if you go towards, it's the second to the last page, is where the minutes, staff is recommending that the minutes more, fully reflect the Planning Commission's direction. So I just wanted to announce that and provide that background information to the Commission as you consider adopting the amended version of the minutes.
Would you mind explaining briefly, is it too much detail?
I can read into the record. So previously, in the minutes, the draft minutes that went out to the Planning Commission, it made the distinction of two different FARs, and it was characterized as 1,000 square feet plus 35% of the lot size for lots less than 7,000 square feet, and for lots 7,000 square feet or above, there would be a 0.5 FAR. This is not exactly the direction that the Planning Commission gave. Instead, the Planning Commission recommended using a formula, which is defined as 1,000 square feet plus 35% of the lot area and no less than a 0.5 FAR. We provided a transcription of the meeting minutes. This is on the dais as well, so you can sort of recollect that conversation. But again, the way that staff presented it was not exactly as the Planning Commission had directed, so we wanted to make that most clear. And actually, this was brought to our attention by two Planning Commissioners.
Thank you for explaining it. So we'll move ahead with a motion to approve.
I do just want to comment, and not sure exactly procedurally the best way to handle this. I do think as the minutes have been amended, that does capture what we concluded at, towards the end of a 5.5 hour meeting. I would say that it actually doesn't work because we're asking to define a floor area ratio using a formula of 1,000 square feet plus 35% of lot area. If you calculate 1,000 square feet plus 35% of lot area, you actually get a maximum floor area. You don't get a ratio unless you then divide that back by the lot area. So, this is an accurate reflection of the minutes, but at some point as this goes to the City Council, we will want to fix that by either dividing all that back by the lot area or just simply defining a maximum floor area. So I don't know procedurally the best way to proceed. I mean, our intent was clear, but what we ended up saying doesn't mathematically work. So if we could fix with, you know, everyone agreeing our intent is quite clear, it just wasn't drafted properly on the fly.
Yes, we can certainly clarify that the mathematical formula is to determine the maximum floor area and not confuse it with the floor area ratio, is what I'm hearing.
Very good. I think the clearest way to state it is maximum floor area is the greater of 1,000 square feet plus 35% of the lot area or 50% of the lot area. I believe that exactly is what we intended. Are the fellow commissioners comfortable with that?
I believe you're correct.
Yeah, I think, again, I think staff has got the absolute intent. I agree that the word ratio doesn't work mathematically, and so it's either change the formula to divide by the lot area if you want a FAR, but I think you're pointing out correctly that the point is to calculate the floor area, and so simpler just to eliminate ratio and FAR.
And exactly is what we intended. Okay.
We're ready to move ahead with a motion with the amendment.
And through the chair, you would like the minutes to be reflected to use the language that you just recommended, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I motion to approve the minutes as so amended.
I second.
Commissioner Roof,
Yes.
Commissioner Iacoponi,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
and Chair Bradley.
Yes. Thank you for the correction. Since it was after midnight, we were all tired. Next, we move on to public hearing. The procedure for public hearings is the staff will present a report on the history, physical features, etc., on the application, followed with the staff's recommendation. The applicant will make a presentation, and thereafter interested members of the community may speak on the proposal. When all interested parties have had an opportunity to be heard, the hearing will be closed and no further discussion from the floor can be held. The commission will then consider the evidence and make its recommendation. If you challenge a public hearing item in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this notice, the public notice, or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Speakers should fill out a speaker's form found by the door and hand it to the recording secretary or any one of us prior to addressing the commission. The speaker should come up to the microphone and speak since the meeting is being recorded. This will assist the staff in preparing our formal minutes. And the first case this evening is 1819 Eaton, and that will be followed by 170 Glen Way, and 1119 Industrial Road will be the last item tonight. Andrea, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Andrea Martisich, an Associate Planner with the City, and I'll be presenting this item this evening. The applicant is requesting design review approval for a new residence, as well as determination of a creek setback at 1819 Eaton Avenue. This 12,619 square foot lot is zoned RS6, single family, and there's an existing 3,200 square foot single story residence on site. It also has an existing pool located towards the rear. There are 5 existing trees located on the property along the front, and all are proposed to remain. I did want to also point out there is a large redwood tree included within those 5 trees at the front, which is proposed to remain and also has some recommendations in terms of protection during construction. Cordilleras Creek is located to the rear of the lot. The applicant's proposing a new 2-story house with an attached 2-car garage and an attached 1-car garage, so 3 covered parking spaces total, for a total area of 5,279 square feet. The proposed lot coverage is approximately 30%, and the floor area is approximately 42%. The proposed frontage, so the portion of the house that you'll actually see from the street, is about 81 feet in length. In addition to the proposed residence, the applicant is proposing to retain the pool but reconfigure it slightly, add some landscaping and hardscaping within that 25-foot creek setback. This is the site plan for the proposed residence, and I just wanted to point out the gray area is the outline and footprint of the proposed residence. You can see towards the rear the existing pool, as well as a fairly large backyard where the creek is located. The first floor, we'll get back to it. Okay. The first floor contains 1 bedroom, 1.5 bathrooms, an office, a kitchen, dining room, living room, and a family room. And there's a large covered patio located off the rear of the family room. The second floor contains 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a laundry room. And this is the front elevation. You can see the 3-car garage on the left side of the screen. The single-car garage is set back slightly from the 2-car garage on the furthest left side. And this is the rear elevation, so you can see that large covered porch on the left side of the screen. And these are the 2 side elevations. The upper elevation is the left elevation, and you can see that the second story is set back more on that side, on the left side. And on the right side elevation, is the lower image below. And I wanted to take a moment, there we go, to discuss a comment in the staff report about the encroachment of the second story. This project was originally scheduled for hearing, and during finalization of the report, staff realized that there was a issue with the encroachment of the second story on the plans. So the upper left diagram is from our municipal code, and it demonstrates that applicants are allowed to align the upper floor with the lower floor or encroach into the setback up to 4 feet for a length of 30% of the lower wall. And so this is what that diagram on the upper left demonstrates. The purpose and intent of this rule is really to limit second story massing along the side property line. For this proposal, a portion of the second story on the right side is not in compliance with this requirement. So looking at the table and based on the specifics of this proposal, the applicant would be allowed to have a maximum length of 15.75 feet of area that encroaches into the side setback on the second floor. They're currently proposing 22.9 feet. So therefore, in order to comply, a reduction of about 7 feet would be required. On the right side of the screen is the floor plan of the second floor, and I've boxed the area in yellow, the portion that's encroaching into the side. As I mentioned, we did discover this error late in the game. When we did discover it, we informed the applicant immediately, and in order to keep them moving forward with the hearing, we added a condition, which is condition 4B in the draft code compliance certificate, which would allow them to reconfigure this area to, as part of the building permit set of plans, and make it compliant at that point. And then I just included an elevation, a blown-up elevation of the right side, and highlighted in yellow the two areas that are encroaching the 30%. So the front bedroom is encroaching about 26% of the length, and the stairwell is encroaching about 17.6%. And just to clarify visually, that blue line is the length of the first floor from which we take the 30% to come up with the number. So this is the contextual rendering for the house. The applicant is proposing cement plaster stucco in a warm white cream color. The applicant is also proposing stone veneer along the two-story right side portion of the front of the house. The windows, door, and window trim will be a darker ebony color. The garage doors will be stained dark gray, and the roof is proposed to be composition shingle. The landscape plan includes native landscaping and also two 24-inch box crepe myrtle at the rear of the property and one 24-inch box Celtis cyanisis at the front. And as I mentioned before, the homeowner is keeping the 5 existing trees along the front as well. The applicant is also requesting determination of a creek setback. As I mentioned before, Cordilleras Creek is located to the rear of the property, and accordingly, the project is located in the Stream Development and Maintenance Overlay District. Properties within this district are limited to the work that can be done within a 25-foot setback from the top of bank. So generally speaking, only very limited work can be done here without extra approvals, such as vegetation maintenance, storm drain, erosion protection, things like that. But the municipal code does allow the Planning Commission to set a specific creek setback less than the 25 foot as required by the code. Sure.
A quick procedural question. So has this been to the RDRC? Are we being asked to make an RDRC review of this in addition to the creek setback?
That is correct. So the municipal code does require that if an applicant is asking for a specific approval, that all the approvals that go along with the original approval bump up. So for example, your purview is the creek setback, but because they're also doing the design review, that packages with the higher level approval and comes to you.
I see.
So
the RDRC has not looked at that?
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
So on this screen, the left side, the plan on the left side demonstrates the existing conditions. So within the red line demonstrates generally where the 25-foot creek setback is. And within that area, there is an existing pool paving and landscaping. On the right is the proposed layout. And as you can see, it's pretty similar. The pool will be reconfigured with a new spa and become slightly bigger. The hardscape will be reconfigured as well, and the applicant is also proposing a seat wall, fire pit, and a new retaining wall towards the rear of the property. As the property owner is requesting this determination, staff is recommending that rather than requesting a specific number, so for example, a 2-foot setback, that if you choose to approve this, you're limiting the setback to exactly what's shown on the plans. So at a certain point, it'll be 2 feet to the retaining wall. At another point, it'll be 3 feet to the pool equipment. And what this does is if in the future there's any deviation from these plans, the applicant would be required to do another biological study for that specific proposal, as opposed to approving a setback along the whole rear of the bank. So these diagrams are from the biological report, and I just wanted to include them to show the existing and proposed pervious and impervious areas. The pink area is the area that is pervious. So on the left, you can see that there is slightly less, about 250 square feet less pervious area than in the proposed. So the applicant is reducing the amount of concrete and impervious area, which is a benefit to this project. The applicant is also not proposing any work below the top of bank, so within the creek. As part of the review process, a biological consultant was hired to review the proposal, and their analysis noted that because there's no work below the top of bank and nothing is becoming nothing is becoming closer to the top of bank, that is a benefit to the creek. The report concludes that since the setback will improve the ecology of the site, because of the impervious surface within the setback will be reduced. There's no trimming or removal of riparian trees in the area, and the amount of stormwater runoff will actually be reduced, what's going into the creek. So the report did find that this would actually benefit the site itself. Because of that, staff has no objections to the proposed improvements in their vicinity, and especially because no part of the house itself is proposed within that 25-foot setback. In terms of outreach, the property owners both mailed the plans to their neighbors and also held a meeting. At their meeting, they did have a few questions about noise from pool equipment and construction parking, and they did respond to that. It's included in an attachment. Staff has also included conditions added to the draft code compliance certificate requiring a construction staging plan, which will have to show where construction parking will be, as well as a cut sheet for the pool equipment, just demonstrating that it meets the San Carlos noise ordinance. The city mailed the public notice to a 300-foot radius and also published it in a newspaper. And as a result of both the property owner's outreach and the city's outreach, we have not received any comments other than the 2 that the applicant turned in from their meeting. This is the formal motion. Should you choose to approve this item, I'm available for questions, and the property owners and applicant are here, and I know the applicant would like to speak as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to speak now, owner or consultant? State your name, please.
My name is Guy Cross, and I'm joined by my wife, Erica Nelson.
Hello.
Good evening.
So good evening. Thank you very much for your time in reviewing our project. My wife and I have been living here in San Carlos for the last 8+ years on Eucalyptus. You may have been on that street for Christmas. And we've got 3 boys and a lot of family that have moved to the area. And so we love San Carlos, but we were getting a little tight on our current home. And so we found a wonderful property on Eaton, which had a little bit more space and a pool, which we think would be great for our 3 growing boys. And so we've worked very hard to make sure that we're keeping the house no bigger than it needs to be, because we want to preserve that backyard and that beautiful space. And we've worked with the city, with Jill previously as a planner since February, and tried to do everything we could in terms of ecological studies and design to keep this home in keeping with the area and the traditional homes of Eaton. So we're excited to be here today. It's been a long process, and we appreciate your consideration. I don't know if you have anything else.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And I think we wanted to introduce our architect, Una, who wanted to comment a little bit about some of the things you were shared with earlier.
Good. Thank you. Welcome, Una.
Thank you. Good evening. If you could just give me a second, I'm going to try and get my laptop hooked up here so I could have a couple graphics to share with you. As Guy and Erica said, we've been working on this project with the planning department. Our original submittal was in April. It's been a long process. And it's not really been a long process because there was a lot of controversy or even strong comments from the planning department. It just took a long time. Our first review letter came 70 days after we submitted the project. But knowing what the city's been going through, we've been patient and understood that it was going to be a process. This is a substantial home, and we understood that, and we've tried to do everything we can to accommodate the schedule of the city, and we are here before you today, almost 6 months later. But we're happy to be here. And there are a couple of things that I just want to point out, and I have some 3D model images that I think I may have shared those with Andrea, but they weren't in the presentation. I have those with me tonight to share with you. And I have some photographs of some homes in the neighborhood that we sort of used as inspiration for this particular style of home. And what I'd really like to do is address the comment about the stair setback that Andrea brought up being an encroachment that she's hoping you guys will approve as a condition of approval for us to make an adjustment during planning building department review. So As some of you know, I've been working in the city for a long time, for almost 14 years, and I've done a lot of two-story homes in San Carlos. And I pride myself on working really well with the planning department, especially with Jill, with Andrea, and understanding the code well. Until I got the letter a week ago, saying that my project actually doesn't meet the municipal code. And what I would really like to do is just talk quickly about that item, and then you guys can ask me questions, and then I would love to just share with you some 3D images of the model of the home and some things that I just want to point out about the landscaping and the neighborhood. So just to back up, I worked really closely with Jill after she sent us her first letter of review in July, I think it was. Early July. I submitted in April, and in early July I got her first letter of review, and she had a comment in there about the second story the second floor setback with respect to the stairwell. And we met with her and we reviewed it, and we reviewed the code, and I showed her 4 other projects in San Carlos where I have used this exact interpretation of the code. And these projects have been built, and these projects have gone before the RDRC. So what I'm really hoping to understand tonight is how an interpretation can change when I've been using an interpretation of the code for several years, and why 5 months into the review process, I find out that we're being asked to make a major change.
I'm sorry, can you just recap like what that is? I mean, you're constrained by floor area, or is this a lot coverage question?
It's neither. It's just it's a setback, a second floor setback. So
Okay.
Andrea showed the diagram and highlighted in yellow the walls that are allowed to be 30%
Yes.
at the first floor setback. So this is the diagram. This is the change in the elevation that I made for Jill back in July that we had met on, and she ostensibly agreed to this interpretation that I told her I've used on several projects. There's 2 things in the code. There's an interpretation of what floor area is, and there's an interpretation of what a story is. My understanding, what I've been told by some planning staff in the past, and which I've used on several projects, is that if a wall is less than 25 feet tall and it doesn't have a second floor, it essentially is a tall 1-story wall. In other words, it would not have to be calculated into that 30% wall length. So as you can see here, at the left side of the screen, my second story wall is 13.5 feet long, which is, 20-something, 26%, I think Andrea said, of the total wall length. Oops, sorry. And the stair wall is 9'3" wide, which if it was counted as a second story wall, it would put me over that 30%. But since the wall itself, where the stair landing is 21.5 feet tall, I've always understood that it could be deemed a 1-story element.
And I'm sorry, is the stair landing like over those doors, or is that actually open?
So, So actually, that dash line that you see, we were doing that for the neighbor's benefit. You wanted to see, or I wanted to show her where the 7-foot tall wall fence line would be. So those doors would be to basically a small storage space that would be exterior, and the landing would be at that height.
Okay, I mean, so there is a landing flat right there against the exterior wall.
Yes.
And you're saying that's not living area? Like, what's your argument on that?
I'm arguing that if a stair is technically only counted once in floor area, so I don't count it as a first floor area and a second. It's its own thing. It's counted as one level, technically, as far as I can understand. So if the landing is not an upper story, if it's in the middle, and the height of this wall is less than 25 feet tall, technically, it's not a 2-story upper story level.
Yeah.
And the definition is
it's-
upper story.
I wonder if staff has wrestled with this question, but I mean, it seems to me if that was like an open foyer, like a front door wide open all the way up, you have a pretty good argument. But with a landing right there, I mean, that is, has staff thought through this interpretation?
Yes, we have. And like Andrea mentioned in the staff report, there's been a transition, or not in the staff report, but in her presentation, she basically, finished up the remaining steps to bring this project forward to the commission. It had been reviewed previously by Jill Lewis, who's no longer with the city. So Andrea took this project on and prepared it for the public hearing. When she began looking at the project and to finish up writing the details that go within the staff report and all the attachments, she noted the issue. And this was brought to my attention. I had conversations with the community development director, Al Savay, and what this really is a code interpretation that has been misunderstood and misapplied by the previous staff planner. The requirement that the second story only align for a maximum of 30% is this development standard currently in the RS6 zoning district. And what Una has just described has to do with a section of the code, which is a different section of the code that establishes the rules of measurement. So it provides direction on how to measure certain things. How do you measure a setback? How do you measure the height? And within that section, there is a description of what a story is. And so a story is currently defined in our code as measuring from the finished floor up to the ceiling as 25 feet for a story. And that definition is used to measure a story in any number of zoning districts that we currently have in the city. So what this is really about is an unfortunate misunderstanding of the code, which obviously seems like that was communicated to the applicant and the owners for which they would be able to do. However, if we interpret the code that way, it really waters down the purpose and intent of the 9-foot second story side yard setback. As the commission knows, this has been an item or an issue that has been discussed at length in terms of how to address the second story massing. And currently there is in the RS6 zoning district, it is required that the side yard setback for a second story element be 9 feet. However, the code does allow some flexibility up to a maximum of 30% to align with the story below. So we have a situation where the second story massing is exceeding that 30%, and that's what we're recommending be corrected. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Back to the presentation that Andrea gave, show that diagram again.
Yeah, so let me...
I'd like to know if there's an interpretation or a section in the code that actually defines a stairwell, because is it a story or is it part of the first floor? If it's a landing that's midway, but the height doesn't exceed the 25-foot story definition, it definitely is. Sure.
I would also like to mention that there is a provision within the code that basically states where there is a potential or a seemingly conflict within the code between two different standards, then the more restrictive applies.
Well, I don't even necessarily view it as a conflict. I mean, the code area of the 30% is pretty clear. It's unfortunate if that's been misapplied. Has there been a history of that being misapplied? I mean,
This is the first time that it's come to my attention, but I did receive emails from the applicant where she had noted that prior staff has made an interpretation that would allow for this. But once I discovered it, again, this is a matter that I, took seriously. I spent some time looking at the plans to really understand what was happening here and had conversations with the director to make sure that what we were going to communicate with the applicant is how we're interpreting this provision of the code. And if you look at the diagram here in this slide, it really shows the purpose and intent, which is to really try and control the second story massing.
If I can, I'm sorry. I would just like to say that I have worked in the city of San Carlos for a long time. We got this letter from the planning department less than 10 days ago. I mean, if this had been brought to my attention when I first met Jill, when she first did her review and she reviewed it maybe with Lisa, I could understand, and I would not have come here tonight trying to argue this on behalf of my clients. But we're almost 6 months into this review, and I feel that there was a precedent set on several of my past projects where, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to name names, but there was a planning staff person who, back when this code was first set forth, actually, I didn't come up with this idea myself. They actually worked with me and said, yeah, if you look at this section of the code and it's less than 25 feet tall, technically it meets the one-story element definition. So therefore, don't count it as part of the 30%. I don't use it on all my projects, but on projects where I have a stair up against a side setback, I have used it, and I've used it on 4 projects in the past.
Thank you for the explanation. And, you know, I would first say I would also probably feel frustrated, maybe annoyed, but let's say frustrated, having been this far into the project and then having a piece of the code more clearly applied to the project, and then pointing out actually that what you've used in the past is not in compliance. And maybe I would just reflect that, and you were here the other evening, we've now gone through, as a group, numbers of hours of listening to the public express their concern about whether or not the city enforces its own regulations, whether the RDRC process is one that takes into consideration what people are generally objecting to, which is the mass, and therefore, you know, following our own sets of rules. So I would just point out that your project's at a difficult time because the public have made themselves very clear about what it is they expect of their government.
Yeah, I understand that, and I'd like to just, for the record, say, if this project had been approved in a timely manner, we probably would have come before you prior to the first hearing you had on the zoning standards, and maybe this wouldn't be as big of an issue as it is. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse, but I'm just, on behalf of my clients, I'm really trying to see if you could help us understand how we can do something without having to do a complete redesign at the 11th hour of this project. Let me just, can I go forward and just show you the project? And
yeah, and I would just say I would like to hear the rest of the presentation. I understand, and thank you for laying out the circumstances of that. In no way would we want to set a new precedent, but, you know, I am a bit sympathetic to your situation, and, you know, would think about, I guess I would like to hear if there are any concerns of the neighbors regarding that aspect of your design, and then you know, we could consider something. But let's hear the rest of your presentation.
yeah, so thanks. On that note, I'd like to say that we did back in May host a community outreach meeting. I always recommend it on projects like this, not just send a letter of, hey, we're doing this project, do you have any comments, but actually invite people to come. And we had 2 neighbors show up, the neighbor directly to the right and then a neighbor across the street. And as Andrea said, that there were questions about construction and parking, because that's a busy street and parking's an issue, about how loud is the pool equipment going to be. And Veronica Dills, the neighbor to the right, also asked if she could see what the outline of the existing house is in terms of elevation, so she can get a sense of how much taller this house is going to be with respect to her home. And so we followed up with her and sent her a diagram, and I believe that Erica has had some communication with her, and I don't believe that there were any other letters of either opposition or support or whatnot. And did we, I'm not sure if we forwarded those actually to, oh, okay. So those hopefully were forwarded to Jill, so they should have been in the packet. Well, one of the things I just want to point out is, yeah, this is a substantial home, no doubt about it. We're at 41.8% FAR, and we're at 26 point, sorry, what was the, We are at 29.8% lot coverage. But as you can see in this diagram, the blue, the dashed blue highlighted outline is the footprint of the existing home. The black outline is the footprint of the proposed home. The proposed footprint is approximately 116 square feet larger.
Where's Eden on this?
Just on the bottom of the page. This is a
Okay.
partial site plan. Sorry. We're looking at the bottom of the page is facing the street.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So the footprint of the house is actually 116 square feet larger, but I'm going to just use my cursor here. If you can see all this area over here, we're basically filling this area in with new floor area, but we're reducing, like the garage is coming back 5.5 feet there. The garage is coming back 8 feet over there. The front door is setting back 10 feet deeper than the current entry. The front wall is setting back a foot beyond the existing front wall of the house. On the side where we've got an existing 4-foot first floor setback, we're going to go to 7 feet on the first floor. And then in the back, we're bringing the rear of the house. This is the covered porch still projects out, but we're bringing the rear structure of the home in 8 feet. So in terms of like how the house is sitting on the lot, it's actually pushed in on all sides. We are adding some floor area, but as you can tell, it's in that area where it's sort of underutilized floor area now. We're keeping, they want to keep as large of a backyard as possible, and they wanted to push the house back without going too far into the yard that they get too close to the pool.
And those 3 bump outs on the right, which one's the staircase we were talking about?
The staircase is this dark one right here. So
Okay.
currently, the footprint of the house is 4 feet from the property line here. This stair is going to be 5.5 feet from the property line. This is a fireplace, and this is a fireplace here. So this is the blue line is the existing.
I see. And existing is 1 story? Is that?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Yeah, the existing is 1 story. So stylistically, what we were hoping to achieve architecturally is, I want to show you just a few photos of some of the neighboring houses that we were inspired by in some ways, uninspired by in some other ways, and just trying to make sure that we were in keeping with massing. This is the house at 1800 Eden, which is directly across the street. Just in doing my own visual measuring with counting up siding and bricks, the peak of this roof is roughly 26 feet from the grade. This house is, I believe it's 46% FAR on a 9,000 square foot lot, where we're going to be 41.8. This is a home that was just finished 3 doors down. Again, a tall 2-story element facing the street. That's, I don't know what the setback is here, but it's probably close to 15 feet, where we are 20'7" to our front 2-story wall. Sorry about that. These are a couple other homes down the street on Eden. Again, a 2-story. This is probably I would call this on the left side a French Revival, on the right a Spanish Revival home, again with 2-story wall elements. This is the house that's on the corner of Stafford and Eaton. Tall, steep pitched roofs. Here's a interesting Tudor style home that looks like it was built probably in the 90s. Again, a 2-story wall. And there are a couple more up and down the street. So these are, Eaton has some large size lots. Again, this house right here has a really nice magnolia tree in front, so it really breaks down the massing of this 2-story element. I want to point out that in the contextual rendering that Andrea showed you, I haven't mastered my 3D modeling yet, but the trees that are shown, actually my model is sitting on top of the vegetation, and if I could, I would have pulled the vegetation in front. But there's a really tall redwood tree that's going to be protected that's on the left side of this existing 3-car garage. And on the right side of the home, where we have our tallest element of the house that's 20.5 feet from the front property line, we've got 3 tall birch trees that are roughly, I'm going to say this is 40 to 50 feet tall, and a nice maple tree that are going to be maintained. So I think this tree is going to go a long way to help soften the effect of the two-story element that we're proposing on the right side of the home.
Do you have photos of the properties to the left and to the right?
Yes.
Do I have them in this particular? Well, actually, they're in the composite rendering. Let me just open that and you can see. The property to the left has a two-car garage that's sitting in front of the house. So,
It's 1811 Eaton,
yes, it is.
and the
correct.
other side is 1829.
1829, correct. And the majority of the right side two-story element is directly in front of the garage of the house on the right. And then it steps down to all one story at the back of our property, which is one of the things that we were showing the neighbors, that their living space on that side is going to be adjacent to one story, our one-story element. And then this house is interesting. It's got a detached garage sitting in the front, and as you could see in Andrea's site plan, the actual main house is set quite a bit back, which means it's going to have, there's no relationship really because it's going to be facing our rear yard.
So just kind of looking at this, part of what we're doing here tonight is the RDRC review. So I would just ask you, by that standard, do you feel this project is compatible with neighboring development by avoiding big differences in building scale and character between developments on the adjoining two lots?
Clearly, the right side lot, I would not say that it is compatible to that exact home. However, across the street, there is a house that's even closer to the property line that's facing this home. There are houses up and down Eaton where a large two-story development that's original is built next to a one-story home. So in that sense, the context is very compatible. I would also like to say that, we are in San Carlos, where a lot of these 1940s homes that are getting close to 80 years old, 70 years old, are essentially ready for some significant remodeling. We may see a house, I have a house actually on Kelton that I worked on 5 years ago, and the neighbors are now putting up an equally big size second-story addition next to it. Those neighbors had some concern when we first did the house on Kelton, but they understood that they had an intent to actually develop their home too. So I would say, if you were to ask me exactly, do we really match? Are we super compatible to the houses on either side? Stylistically, no. But in terms of context to the neighborhood and other large homes on the street and across the street, directly across the street, I would say yes.
There's also the lot size is about half. It's like 5,000 square foot lot on the left side.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know what the size of the lot at 1829 Eaton is. Maybe Andrea can tell us.
The one on the left is just under 6,000. It's like 5,700.
Your lot seems to be the largest in the block from the plot plan.
If you'd like, I can show you some model images that, if I can pull them up real quick. Again, I apologize. These are out of context. I don't have rendered landscaping or neighbors in these particular images, but I thought it would help because I know sometimes large elevations look more massive than they are because you're not seeing the three-dimensional quality of them. So this is a view from the front left corner. As you can see, we stepped the garage back. And the current property has a three-car garage, and because Eaton is a very busy curved street, especially where they're right on a curve or right next to a curve, off-street parking is critical. And because they have a large enough lot to do that, we decided to go ahead and match the same size garage that is currently on the house, which is on the existing property, which is about 370 square feet. There's a view from the front. That's sort of an elevation view, more of a right side view there. a right rear view showing the covered patio with a one-story roof over it. This is the portion of the house that's directly adjacent to the neighbor on the right. But again, we have an additional 3-foot setback to this wall from the existing home. The existing house is built at 4 feet. We're going to be at 7 feet in the rear, roughly 7 feet. And this is a view of the rear of the property. You can see we matched the 2-story element for consistency, but there's the neighbor to the left is quite a ways away, and there should be no concern about privacy or light or anything like that on that side.
That's a garage door on the back?
Yeah, so because they have boys and they want to put a play court in the back, and they want to park 2 cars in the garage, they need a garage where, until a kid probably drives, they're going to park bicycles and scooters and things like that. And having a door on the back that they can open, it gives them an indoor-outdoor play space.
It's a very good idea.
Could you go back to the side, maybe slide 3 or image 3? Yeah, thank you.
I have an image. I have another image that shows the stair wall, if you'd like to see that, because this doesn't show it too well. I have one that's just a right side.
Please
Yeah,
do.
sure.
Yeah, I'll mention that for sure. Yeah. So originally, when we were talking to Jill about this stair wall situation, so you can see we've got a chimney in the front here. This whole wall is at 7 feet. This is our 22 or whatever percent setback. It's greater than 5 feet, which is the minimum. It's at 7 foot, but it's still, if it's not 9, it has to count in the 30%, or 30% has to be applied. So this is the stair wall that's in question. We originally had designed this so that this would be a cantilever and we wouldn't have the wall going all the way to the grade, which is what Guy just mentioned. And we thought that it was a good articulation on the sidewall and that it would actually be an architectural treatment that would look good. And that was when Jill brought the question up to us about the stair wall. And at the time, we talked to her, and she actually made the recommendation that if we continue the wall to the ground, to the grade, she would feel comfortable making a finding that it is technically a 1-story wall. Now, she didn't put that in writing to me, and I'm not speaking for her, but that was my understanding of why she actually suggested it, because we made the change back in July, and then she suggested that we actually present it to the neighbor and show them the change, because they would be the ones that would be directly impacted by it. And we did. We sent an email to the neighbor and showed them this new elevation and the detail that changed. Oh, that's the other thing. Yeah, from the start, we had decided it was going to be like an art glass, so they're going to do some sort of obscure glass there for sure. Thanks, Guy. Yeah, that was brought up in the meeting, the outreach meeting that we had.
Anything else?
Sorry, I'd like to just answer any questions you might have, and happy to show you any more images.
Well, first I'll say that I commend you on your design and saving that lovely redwood tree out front and some of the other landscaping and treating the creek easement with mitigation and sensitivity. In a handsome designed house on the largest lot around, it looked to me, from the plan and visiting the site recently. I regret the misunderstanding or confusion around the details. Now you have to come up with a solution, or we have to try to help you come up with a solution in some way. So I'd like to move ahead that way. Anyone questions of the applicants or the staff?
Do we have any public comment on this?
Well, we can move ahead with public comment. Does anyone wish to speak? I don't have any slips from anybody.
For the public comment, want to understand what the implications of following the city's request to increase the setback to the 30%. What's the impact of that?
Well, Commissioner, I have to say that because this came to us so late in the game, I haven't even had an opportunity to physically sit down with my clients and actually review this. But I have thought about it, and Guy has also thought about it, and it would require a reconfiguration of the stairs and probably the bathroom on the second floor and some space on the first floor. So it's not as easy as just saying, let's just push the landing in. I mean, stairs are really tricky when it comes to moving them around. So it's going to take considerable effort to actually do a redesign on both floors of that section of the house. And I haven't, like I said, it came to us late, so I haven't even had a chance to sketch anything out or really see what the impact might be on the design.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask just a question that's actually not about this issue? I think at the back of the lot, there's a new retaining wall that's going in at the top of the creek bank. Is that correct?
Not really. We had looked at whether or not we would need to put in a significant retaining wall, and because of the impact that it would have, there isn't going to be a major retaining wall there. It's simply going to be a replacement of the fence, and then underneath the fence there's going to be what they call what does the landscape architect call it, like a header board that will actually go down and actually be retained in order to support the fence.
Okay, thanks. So the point is no construction other than replacing the fence in that beyond the kind of the pool area. Yeah.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Well, actually, no, sorry. There is going to be that small pool house. There's a pool house in the middle of the property.
Sure.
That will be built to whatever the standards are for pool equipment.
And I'm sorry, do the standards for pool equipment include soundproofing for an enclosure like that?
I believe that there's a certain maximum decibel that the pool equipment can give off. And so we actually spoke to, Erica spoke to Veronica, the neighbor, about that and said they would be willing to put a lid on it, do whatever they need to do to make sure that the noise is kept at minimum. And we would work with the landscape architect to do that. I believe there's some conditions of approval in the staff report for making sure that the equipment is.
So it'll be some kind of prefab enclosure. It won't be like framed in enclosure.
I think the intent is to create a small structure for it.
It will be a structure.
It will be a small structure. Currently, I think there's some walls around the existing equipment. It would be similar to that. If it had some sort of a sound attenuating roof on it, it would probably be flat, be very low, and the idea is to landscape around it.
If it's framed in, very easy to add insulation. Is that one of the conditions?
So through the chair, the conditions are just to follow the pool enclosure requirements and then also meet the noise levels that are generally, or that are outlined specifically in the code. But there's not a specific requirement that it, have a roof and be attenuated, but we can add that as a, extra teeth for that condition.
Okay, yeah.
And just to clarify, that's
unless, I think that should be a condition. It's easy enough to do, and I think everyone benefits by less equipment noise droning in the background.
The draft conditions of approval for C and D refer to the pool equipment, so we can work it into one of those if that sounds good.
Yeah.
I think we're at a dilemma. Director, can you comment for us?
I'm sorry, but is there any public comment? So we have no one is asked to speak on this project. Okay.
Asked for it. I don't
So are we
see any.
gonna-
Could I get a quick recap, Lisa, just of the public concern that we've heard on this through email and such? I saw some communication. I'm sorry, yeah.
Sure. So we actually, staff has not received any direct comments from the public. The only concerns that we were made aware of came from the applicant themselves as a result of their outreach meeting. And those concerns were the pool equipment noise and the parking on site. Other than that, we have not received any emails or responses in support of or concerns with the
Okay,
project.
and the concern on parking on site, I mean, there's a 3-car garage. I guess I didn't understand that.
So concerns during construction.
Oh,
So,
during
right.
construction, okay.
So we did include a condition of approval for a construction staging plan. I believe it's condition 35. That will be required prior to building permit issuance. And as part of that, the applicant will need to demonstrate where the parking will be located on site and kind of how it works as construction goes on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'm just struck, given no real public comment on the massing, you know, I'm sympathetic for a potential exception here without, of course, creating any type of precedent. But Al, maybe you could give us a sense of our freedom here.
Certainly. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. So it is unfortunate that this occurred. However, with regard to the code itself, the code is very clear, as you can see from the screen, that you get a 30% exception. There's nothing in the code that suggests a stairwell would be exempt from this section of the code. The code also goes along to say that if there's a more restrictive section of the code, then that should be applied. The stairwell itself looks like 2 stories to the common eye. I think one of the commissioners noted that as well. We don't see a way that city staff could have the authority to make the interpretation that the stairwell is exempt or you get more than 30% in this case. We don't believe that the Planning Commission has the authority to make that determination either. What would need to be done is a thing called the zone text amendment, where the applicant would need to apply to change the code to be written to conform to what is being proposed here. So we just don't see any way to interpret this in a different way. We think the code is crystal clear with regard to this particular point. Now, going back to what the architect has mentioned, if this has happened in the past, it's very unfortunate because those houses were unaware of where that has occurred. We can always go back and take a look at those. However, moving forward, we think it's very clear what the code says and that we can't make that interpretation, and we would recommend that the commission not make that interpretation either.
I see. So there's no provision a commission has for a variance.
A variance is a completely different thing. Yes, that's another avenue, actually. In fact, that's very interesting you bring that up. You could make a variance, or the applicant could apply for a variance as opposed to doing a zone text amendment. However, a variance requires that the applicant show that there is physical characteristics of the lot that would make it very difficult, if not impossible, to do a house the way they wanted to do it at a reasonable size and scale. Because this lot is very large and you could move things around and still comply with the code, we would not be able to support the findings for a variance. There's 2 or 3 different findings. 1, the physical characteristics. 2, that you won't set a precedent for future projects of this nature.
Can I
Thank
make
you.
a comment? Is it too late for me to make a comment? Can I?
Feel free.
Yeah. So the comment that it's crystal clear is something that I just like to comment If you look at the diagram that's shown up on the screen, the definition says upper story wall may align with the lower story wall or project a maximum of 4 feet into the required second story setback for up to 30%. But where is the definition of an upper story wall? If my stairwell has a landing that's midway between the first floor and the second floor, and there's no living space below it, it's a storage area that's accessed from the exterior and it's not habitable, how is it very clear to me that what I've designed is an upper story wall? Because it looks like in that case, the upper story wall has a roof that's as tall as the second story. And
I would just chime in and say, I mean, in this case, that's why the code even went so far as to draw this box, to make it very clear any massing on the second story would count in the 30%. I mean, I think it's pretty clear.
That's clear that looks like a second story. But in my case, my second story is above where the stair landing is, where this roof, this 21.5-foot tall roof is.
But doesn't it go through the whole height of the second story?
No.
Okay.
So if you look at my section that I did, sorry, let me just pull that back up. I didn't actually show you that in great detail. I shared, this is, actually Jill had asked me to create a stair section, which I did at the time back in July when we were reviewing this. So let me just zoom out here.
I see.
So at the 9-foot setback, my second story wall, actually this is a cut through because it angles up even taller, but my second story wall is back here. My landing has a roof over it, and the roof at the landing is 21.5 feet. This is my second story here. This is a stair landing, which is not a floor. It's, if you were to look up the definition of floor area, it says it's habitable space. The space below that stair is less than 7 feet. It's not habitable. So I would logically, it would lead me to believe that this is not an upper story. This is a special situation. And the diagram that was up there clearly shows that that's a second story that's aligned with, that roof was aligned with the whole second floor. This isn't a second floor.
And I think that just a couple of things. One clarification: that diagram clearly shows 30%, and the intent is to reduce the bulk and mass on that side of the building. The bedroom also, as you can see in the yellow area, also goes into this area. So architecturally, theoretically, you could realign or change the configuration of the bedroom and leave the other 30% or the other percentage, 17% or whatever it is, in place. One of the things that we attempted to do by putting in a condition of approval for the commission here is to allow, in recognition that this is a burden on the applicant, that there was an error in interpretation of the code, and so in order to move this through quicker, we put a condition in there noting that that under the 30% rule, it could go forward. They could work with staff to clean the situation up, to revise the floor plan, and then it would move through the process and not have to come back to the Planning Commission, thus saving them time. So we tried to, recognize that, yes, this has been a burden, and we're trying to speed up the process for the applicant here.
I would move to close public comment.
I second the motion.
Roll.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Iacopone?
Yes.
Commissioner Dugan?
Yes.
And Chair Bradley?
Yes. Any more discussion amongst us?
Well, I am sympathetic to the tight spot the applicants got into, but I'm a little concerned about paying them back for that inconvenience and expense, and with adjusting the rules in a way. Although formally precedent isn't enforceable going forward. We certainly heard in the arguments today that precedent is something that people keep in mind, and we've got a pretty clear mandate from our citizens about the massing. I'm a little, without having public comment, directly concerned with this. We kind of have to take the greater citizenry perspective into account. Maybe that neighbor isn't inclined to come speak, but we need to be careful to take into account the concern in the community about the massing. And this seems like it's a big house. I do appreciate that it's pushed back a little, but it's taller and it's going to look like another big San Carlos house that people are talking about. And so if on top of that, we're sort of giving them extra square footage because of mistakes by the city, but giving them that extra massing, I think it's, I guess my inclination is that would be difficult to do.
Can I just ask, Al, I think you were clear, but it'd be good if you could say it again. In your perspective, number one, the code is clear, and number two, as such, the Planning Commission actually doesn't have authority or a mechanism to overrule the code.
That's correct. We believe that the correct application of the code is as staff is recommending here. And again, the interpretation is not the correct application of code. Thus, the code would need to be changed for simple as that.
Yeah. Okay, and not to hide behind the code, but recognize that it is what it is, and it's, I'll speak for myself, obligation to enforce it. And I would echo the comments of my fellow commissioners. It is unfortunate that you're at this point. Can understand again how you would find it. Well, understand you have to go back to the drawing board on this point. But from my perspective, I would just echo your comments. I think we are where we are on this project, and B, we are where we are in the point in time in the San Carlos review. And I think we all have a responsibility to follow what we're hearing from the greater citizenship.
Yeah, I would just say that it's a sympathetic situation. I am sorry that it happened that way, specifically if it was at the hand of a planner. But as you've heard, our hands are pretty tied here. You would be free to submit for a variance. It doesn't look like on a 12,000-foot lot there's a hardship there to justify that. I think it sounded like there was a process where you could ask for a clarification in the code. I do understand that's not a real second story, but it certainly is contributing to the massing there. I think it is within the intent. I would say, I would have to look at it more, but if the request for that clarification came before this commission, I don't think it would go in your direction anyways, because I think the intent is quite clear. They're trying to control the massing on anything above the first story. So it's an unfortunate situation. I would say, as far as the RDRC review goes, this is a big project. Arguments could be made that this is out of the character of its neighboring properties, but I do think it's a good design. I appreciated that most of what was being done, specifically from the perspective of Eaton Avenue, was filling in what was already there. I know you're going to a second floor, so it is going to be a much larger house. But I think, you know, we're getting you past the RDRC here, and but we have to enforce the standard on the 30%. It is difficult to move stairs. Perhaps that bedroom could be shifted with a clever use of a closet, but I think you guys will figure that out.
Yes, I would second that too. It seems like the bedroom could be shifted. The stairs may be too difficult, but you'd be within the 30% if you could solve it by moving the bedroom in a couple of feet.
I would just add that the neighbor has not presented themselves, but I guess on their behalf, I would just add the condition that that large window be obscure glass of some kind. It sounded like that was supported, so just make that a condition. And then with the soundproofing, I think we've addressed the public concerns here, the soundproofing of the pool equipment enclosure. With that, I'm satisfied.
Any other comments, or should we move ahead with an amended motion or a regular motion?
So I think the, just to check, when you say amended as the city has proposed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's one of the conditions.
yeah. So I move that the Planning Commission grant the design review approval for a 5,279 square foot two-story residence and associated request for determination of the creek setback at 1819 Eaton Avenue, APN 051406080, as proposed based on the required findings contained in the staff report and subject to the conditions listed in the draft code compliance certificate.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Roof,
Yes.
Commissioner Iacopone,
Yes.
Commissioner Dugan,
Yes.
and Chair Bradley.
Yes. Thank you. If there's an appeal to this, you have 10 days with which to appeal to the council.
Through the chair, and thank you, Andrea, for asking for this clarification. I just wanted to confirm that the motion that was just made does include obscuring the large window. Maybe if you can clarify which window, unless you understand. Pardon?
The stairs.
Yeah, the large staircase
Okay.
window.
And soundproofing measures to the pool equipment structure? Anything more specific, or just, was it just the soundproofing? Because I think we have the two conditions that you noted.
Yeah, just soundproof insulation added to the structure of the
Okay.
pool enclosure.
Thank you for that clarification. We just wanted to make sure we had that correctly for the record.
I agree.
All right, thank you, everyone. Best of luck on your project and the redesign.
Good luck. It's a beautiful design and home.
I'm jealous about the backyard garage door. I like that.
Thank you. Next item is 170 Glen Way, Suite 5.
Good evening, Commissioners. Lisa Costa-Sanders, Principal Planner. The item before you is a request for a conditional use permit to allow automobile sales at 170 Glen Way in Suite Number 5. The subject site is part of a larger complex known as the G.W. Williams Industrial Park, and it includes a mix of industrial, light industrial, and commercial businesses. The site is located at the corner of Glen Way and Taylor Way, and as I indicated, the site is within the light industrial zoning district. AC Motorsport proposes to locate within Suite 5 at the 170 Glen Way building. This tenant space is 792 square feet in area and is designated with 2 on-site parking spaces. The applicant proposes a boutique pre-owned auto dealership and broker. The tenant space includes a large roll-up door with a driveway to Glen Way. All vehicles will be stored entirely within inside the building, and the business proposes to operate on an appointment-only basis. It will be operated by the business owner with no additional employees. And as I indicated, all uses will be conducted entirely indoors. As you see, the suite here, the tenant space is highlighted in yellow. Suite number 5, 792 square feet in area, and that includes an office area, a restroom, and open warehouse space for parking of the vehicles. 2 parking spaces are designated for this tenant space, as shown highlighted in yellow. The required public notice was sent to property owners within 300 feet of the site on September 19th and published in the newspaper on September 20th. No comments have been received as of the preparation of this report. Staff recommends the Commission grant the conditional use permit to allow the specialty automotive dealership at 170 Glenway, Suite 5. And here's the motion. The business owner is here this evening to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Is the owner present? Good evening.
Answer any questions, or would you like me to speak on it? It's a small space. I'll be running it myself. The reason it is by appointment only is because the certain kind of cars, you don't want everyone to know what kind of cars are in there. It's not going to be open to the public traffic, so people won't just be able to drive by and know what's in there. You have to see online, speak with me, and make an appointment to get into there and see what's in there.
The report said you'd have as many as 4, but no more than 6 vehicles.
Yes.
I don't see how you would get 4, 5, or 6 vehicles any more than 3 in there. I've been to the site. The door looks like it's about 9 feet wide. You've got an office space on the one side and a bigger space. I don't see how you'd get more than 3 cars in there.
Okay. I have rented
smart cars.
Well, I will deal with smart cars. Those are Mercedes, but so I have done a pre-run in there. I have cars myself and a small collection, so I put my cars in there. I've mixed it up. I put some bigger sedans in there and some smaller sports cars. And they're so if you corner the cars in there, you can get 2 cars back in the corner, and then there will be enough space to put 2 cars. There is like a longer driveway, so the driveway will be from maybe here to that wall there, and then there will be a bathroom, so you can probably put 2 cars in from here to that space there.
And I'm sorry.
I'm not concerned about the number. I just didn't look to scale to me.
Well, if
792 feet.
You have to be creative, but you know, I have to crawl before I can walk. So,
what's the square footage?
It's close to 800 square feet.
800 feet.
Yes.
Okay. And just a quick question for staff: are there any fire concerns that had to be addressed, given we're putting vehicles inside a building here? And as verified with the fire department? Or?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for staff, which is for my own education, which is why is this being brought to the Planning Commission?
Great question.
Yeah, the applicant had the same question. The code does require that automobile sales requires a conditional use permit, and I think it's a
special category of business operations.
Auto sales, right? So it's probably more your typical auto dealership has a large inventory outdoors, and I think that's the main reason. It could be something in a future code change when it's entirely indoors. It could be maybe handled at a staff level, because we have had, I think, at least one other of these businesses recently approved, and I'm aware of a couple of others in town. And I understand what the owner is trying to do. It's that very specialty, high-end, kind of almost a broker relationship. So it's not your traditional used car dealership where the inventory is outside. And so that's the main reason, is really to control that visual appearance for the outdoor sales.
Are there any more questions of the applicant?
Was there any public comment of any kind? Okay.
Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this case? Seeing none, and I have no slips, we can move ahead.
I move that the Planning Commission approve the request of Alfonso Curry II, AC Motorsport, for a conditional use permit to allow a specialty auto dealership at 170 Glen Way, Suite 5, based on the findings and for the reasons incorporated in the staff report and as conditioned in the conditional use permit.
Second.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Iacoponi?
Yes.
Commissioner Dugan?
Yes.
And Chair Bradley.
Yes. Thank you. Good luck on your project, sir. Next, and our last case is 1119 Industrial, the sign. Design review. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Good evening. So the application before you is request for design review for a sign permit, as well as a mitigated negative declaration for a new billboard on city leased property. St. Carlos Municipal Code was updated in 2013 to permit billboards on city property with design review and a lease agreement. The design review is handled at the Planning Commission level, and then the lease agreement requires action by the City Council. The proposed project includes city lease of a portion of 1119 Industrial Road from the property owner and construction of a new LED billboard, as well as removal of an existing billboard located at 239 Old County Road. The red arrow is where the proposed billboard would be located, so it's behind the building at 1119 Industrial Road and just adjacent to US 101. The site is zoned general commercial industrial and is surrounded by commercial buildings and uses. The billboard is proposed to be 55 feet tall, and the display area is approximately 48 feet by 14 feet. It is a double-sided display area, so that's each side. And that display cabinet is about 41 feet above grade. The pole itself would be a brushed aluminum pole with the city logo on it, and that is consistent with the regulations contained in the sign ordinance section 18.22. It is also designed to match the existing billboard located at the end of Branston Road and the recently approved billboard at 815 American Street, so we would have a consistent design. In compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act, an initial study and mitigative negative declaration was prepared. That study found no impacts from implementation of the proposed billboard that cannot be mitigated to a less than significant level. Mitigation measures include, under the category of air quality and hazardous materials, some work that would have to occur during demolition and construction to ensure that those are mitigated. Mitigation measures relating to cultural resources, if any unknown archaeological resources are found, and as well during hazard and hazardous materials, during demolition and construction, if there's any materials found.
Lisa, can you just explain the circumstances of this site? It's described as city leased property. Like, that means, so someone owns it and the city has a long-term lease on it, and on that we're erecting this billboard.
Correct, and that's the item that would require City Council approval, is the lease agreement with the property owner, as well as the agreement between the billboard owner and the city. So the city will not own the billboard, but we're leasing the property underlying it.
And how much property is that?
I don't have the square footage exactly. It's pretty minimal to accommodate
the size of the. Okay.
And the easement for the access.
And what do you know the economics of that offhand?
Do you have the numbers, Al?
Yeah, so basically, the way it works is the company, Outfront Media, would pay the city a minimum of, I believe it's $200,000 a year, and plus, or 30% of the gross revenues, whichever is greater. And so that's essentially how it works.
From the sign company, and then how much are we paying in lease payments to the property owner?
We pay about well, we don't pay anything, but essentially it's a kind of a pass-through, essentially, okay? So
because it's a revenue share on the sign.
It's a revenue share. So essentially the applicant or the Outfront would pay the city to pay the leasee, the person we lease from. So they would get about $100,000 a year, approximately. And I can be corrected by the by Outfront Media if I'm incorrect on those numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so as part of the CEQA analysis, a visual simulation was prepared. This is the view if you're traveling northbound on Highway 101. The top of the screen is the existing view, and then the bottom would show the proposed billboard location. And then this would be the view as you're traveling southbound. Again, the top is existing, and the bottom is proposed with the new billboard. And then a close-up view if you were standing right in the parking lot, top existing and the bottom proposed. Oh, excuse me. And then this is the existing billboard that would be removed as part of this project. That is a static billboard that's 12 feet by 25 feet, double-sided, located at 239 Old County Road. And we did have a
Lisa, can
question.
you just, I think you were clear in the pre-read, but the intent, what we'd see afterward, is that like cut to grade?
Correct. Be completely
All the stuff.
eliminated. Yes. So the support structures would be completely removed. Yes. And then thank you, Commissioner Iacopone, for your question earlier today about the billboard inventory. So San Carlos properties front approximately 3.6 miles of Highway 101. That includes 2.2 miles on the west side and 1.4 miles on the east side of the freeway. The current inventory of billboards without this project, there's currently 5 static billboards, and one of those will be removed with the recently approved 815 American Street project. There's also 3 electronic billboards in the approved status, so 2 have been constructed, 1 recently approved. If this project is approved and moves forward, there will be a total of 4 electronic billboards in the San Carlos stretch of Highway 101 and 3 remaining static billboards. One of those is located on the east side near the Shoreway Environmental Center, and then there's 2 remaining on the west side of Highway 101.
Question there. How many additional billboards could be squeezed in, given that there's a spacing requirement?
Yeah, it's unlikely. We've looked at some other sites. It's unlikely that any additional billboards would be constructed.
So this is the last one?
Al?
Yeah, in terms of policy direction from the city council, they've talked about a maximum of 3 in our city.
This would be number 4,
This would be the third.
Third
well,
that city owns.
that
yeah.
that the city would then lease, where the city would lease it to a provider. So that would be it. There is one that the city has no financial interest in at the Circle Star building. Yeah.
That other billboard's at the Circle Star location, and that was approved through a variance process back when that development was approved, because they had a previous, essentially, billboard out front that was a large electronic sign advertising events at Circle Star. So that was the first electronic billboard, and then every thereafter is required to be on city property. So as far as the public outreach, we did do a notice of intent for the mitigated declaration, providing a 20-day public review period, and that ran from August 3rd through August 23rd. We did not receive any public comments on the CEQA document. We then mailed a second notice of the intent to adopt the negative declaration, as well as notice of this hearing. That was mailed on September 19th, published on September 20th, and we have not received any public comments to date. And here's the motion. There would actually be 2 motions. The first is a resolution approving the mitigated negative declaration, and the second would be a motion to approve the design review. I'd be happy to try to answer your questions. We also have the applicant here representing the billboard company, as well as our CEQA consultant if you have any technical questions on the CEQA document.
Lisa, so mitigated negative declaration, can you just, I know you just covered it all, but can you just say again exactly what that approval means?
Well, the analysis looked at all the different requirements under CEQA to see if there's an aesthetic impact, biological, public services, and after review and analysis found that there was no significant impacts that can't be mitigated to a level that would be considered less than significant. So once you apply what we're calling the mitigation measures, then we've determined that this project would be less than significant, and therefore the appropriate document is a mitigated negative declaration. One example is if they discover any human remains during the course of digging out for that new billboard, they need to immediately report that, stop construction, investigate it to see, if there's any cultural significance of that. So without that mitigation measure, that could be considered a significant impact under CEQA. And I can have the consultant go into further detail if you wish.
In our packet, do we have the list of what the CEQA standards are?
Yes, so you have what's the CEQA checklist.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I saw something like that.
Right, so each category has its
Okay.
the items that need to be looked at. So aesthetics, would it have a substantial adverse effect on a scenic vista? And then each of those items where the consultant determined less than significant, they described how they came to that conclusion.
And who hired this consultant?
The city hired David J. Powers to complete the analysis.
Okay.
It was all directed by the city, and the applicant was independent in the process.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have another question.
Sorry.
I see in one of the pictures, the pole says City of Good Living, and then San Carlos in small print below it. Is that part of the design?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
So is that going to be visible from? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not part of the pictures of what it would look like. So I'm curious because it's kind of a branding for the city, and
yes.
Are we sure we want to take credit for this?
Right.
Yes.
I think we already have on one or two others.
We already have it on Branston, and I mean, I think the design looks very nice. If you look at one across the freeway to the north, I'm not sure it's as high quality.
Oh, it's the same. For some reason, I never drive by that billboard, so I'm either coming from a different way. But it's similar to the City of Good Living insignia would be of similar scale and impact?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some branding for the city is okay. I mean, having San Carlos be a recognized entity for the larger public, I guess that's good. I'm just curious, is that part lit up?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just, I appreciate that it was asked what the survey is in town. Do we have any, 4 seems like a lot to me. Are there any other cities up and down 101 with more than 1 or 2 of these? I mean, maybe that hasn't been looked at. And it's already, I think this has come from the city council, but
I haven't done that
I think
analysis.
we're going to break a record here on electronic billboards.
Actually, that was the root of my question, and Lisa just mentioned she hadn't had a chance to look at it. But is there this density in any other city along the highway? Wouldn't want City of Good Living to be known as the city of bright lights at night, but.
We can certainly have the applicant describe the lighting for you as well, because it does dim in the evening.
I'd like
we can have
to
them
ask some
expand
questions about that,
Yeah.
about the brightness, to get a better feeling for what we're in for there.
We'll turn that
Does
over to
the
the
applicant
then.
here wish to speak? Come up, please. Introduce yourself. Welcome.
My name's Jeff McEwen. I'm with Outfront Media. Appreciate you guys considering the opportunity for us to work here in the city. So you had a question about the lighting. The lights are controlled to work basically at 0.3 foot candles above ambient light. So in the evening, they actually come down to a much lower, I think it operates at about 1/6 of capacity, and then comes back on as the sun rises. The lights are turned off, I believe, from midnight to 6 a.m. Al, is that correct? So they're off in the midnight to 6. And the perfect example is the one that's on Branston that's been existing here for a couple of years, and then the new one going up soon. They'll be exactly the same. They'll look the same technology for lighting.
Is the restricted hours part of the rules? It's not just informal.
It's part of our lease agreement with the applicant.
How's the brightness, the foot candle part doesn't mean, it's nice to hear that it dims, that makes sense, but the brightness, the billboard that's a little further south on 101, maybe it's a Circle Star one, or maybe it seemed very bright to me. It's almost like when I'm driving there, it's sort of like, wow, they could really allow that. It's so intense that it's a distraction. So is this one different from that one?
That's much older technology, and I actually believe, because I think our company may be helping them, putting in new screens there, which should help that. But it still should not be any brighter than what the California state authorizes, and the OAAA, which is the Outdoor Advertising Act, regulates how bright the signs can be. So it still should be operating at the same, but if it's looking brighter, it's probably because it's older technology, and sometimes a white background on older technology looks a little bit brighter than some of the new ones. It's a softer look with the new technology.
Is that San Carlos or Redwood City?
The really
That's
bright
San
one?
Carlos, I believe, yeah.
That's the Circle Star one that was mentioned, is that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Redwood City, San Carlos boundary goes right through where the Circle Star building used to be. So
Right.
it seems to me that the sign, which is on the north edge of the building, would be in our city.
Is there anything directional about the lighting? I mean, is it, I'm always struck, I live, I don't know, maybe 4 miles from 101, but I'm in the hill, I have a view, and those signs are actually bright from 4 miles away, and I'm perpendicular to the highway. I'm just always, they're oriented on the highway, but is there anything directional about this new technology that kind of beams it directionally up the highway?
Yeah, the LED displays have louvers on them, directing the light into a condensed area, so it's not sparse, it's not going out, it's not going up, it's keeping everything in front to the traffic. So the technology that's within the last 5 years has really corrected that, and everything is directed just towards the traffic and not dispersing.
Can you tell us what's likely to be advertised on the signs and how often they would change?
They're changing every 8 seconds. The advertising is going to be, general advertising, car dealers, national accounts. I'm not sure. I'm not in the sales department, so
It's not really a directional sign because we don't have car dealers here.
Well, it could be. I mean, it could be somebody directing to the traffic south or north. It's all up to the applicant or to the advertiser.
As part of the lease agreements, does the city get airtime, visual time?
Yes, I believe 4 times a year. Yeah.
Al, given our City of Good Living labels right on it, is there any content control we have if some objectionable adult thing gets advertised, or lingerie, I don't know, but anything that would be of concern to have our city name on?
Yes, we do have the right to ask that certain things be removed. There was an example of that on our first billboard where something occurred, and the city contacted Clear Channel, and they took it off immediately. So we do have that capability.
Okay.
Political ads are allowed or not?
I don't know about political ads, but I think it may have been a political ad that was removed at the time.
Just because of the juxtaposition of the city of San Carlos and a political ad, I guess I don't know, there's a slippery slope there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't recall about political ads.
I don't think we, usually on city agreements, we don't allow political ads.
Okay.
I think that's in there.
Yeah.
And this sign will be, according to the proposed or application, 55 feet high.
Correct.
And some, did I read 14 feet by 40 feet, something like
The screen size is 14 feet by 48 feet.
48 feet.
Yeah.
Why so big?
That's a standard across the country. Almost all digital signs are standard. There's some that are actually larger, very few smaller.
What worries me is, according to the standards of the national organization, you can build these every 1,000 feet. That's less than a quarter of a mile. So if we have 2.2 miles on one side and 1.4 on the other side, someone can build another half dozen of these. I drove up and down the freeway and counted, including Home Depot and the circles where the Circle Star Theater used to be, that bright sign, and several others, 5 on the east side and 7 signs existing on the west side. I know this proposal will remove one, but you're replacing it with a bigger one. I don't know how many more we can saturate our community with. I'm generally opposed to signage when it's not directional because I consider it a safety hazard. And I'm tired of voting for them. Thank you. Any other comments? Discussion?
Is there other public comment?
Are we closing the hearing?
Is there anyone here who wishes to speak for or against the project? Any more discussion?
Do I move to close public hearing?
Second.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Iacopone?
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan?
Yes.
And Chair Bradley?
Yes.
I have a wondering that the city council seems to be in on this, and so is it part of a larger?
Yeah, I was going to say that, Al. Could we just get a brief overview of, like, you know, just the history of this, and, you know, if the project's 100%, are we being asked to approve 20% of it here? Or, you know, like, it doesn't feel like we're deciding if a sign should go up or not. It seems like our review here is pretty narrow.
Your review is legally required, so it is an important component of the process. If that's the kind of thing you're looking for, are you looking for more of just to clarify, for sort of the history of it, or like why is the city doing this? Or
not the why, but just, I mean, so this has been approved by the city council and this lease has been approved, you know, like where is this at through the city council? I don't know the history of it.
I guess I was asking because I'd like to know if it's part of a larger understanding of the density and part of our master plan, and it's consistent with that, then that would make me feel more inclined to vote for it. While if it's just been brought forward in isolation without that bigger context, then.
Well, you gentlemen are new to the Planning Commission. We just approved one last year.
Yeah.
So if we're going to have one every year, it won't take long to saturate the city.
it was part of a strategic plan objective from the city council to consider up to, I believe, up to 3 billboards, digital billboards in our community for economic development purposes. There is recognition that if one of these went in, there is a direction that at least one paper sign be removed. So it's a 1-for-1, so that we're not, increasing the number of these billboards in town. And again, from an economic development perspective, it's very significant for the city in terms of general fund resources. For instance, a Home Depot might bring in $200,000 a year in revenue, whereas a billboard takes up a very small area and brings in the same amount. So that's the sort of the background of it. The council has suggested that there is a limit to this, and that we understand as staff that that 3 is the limit that they ever wanted to consider. So that's where it is today.
But has the city council approved aspects of this?
No, they haven't. So what would happen in terms of the process, this is the first step in the process. So you have to get a permit for the sign first from the Planning Commission. Then the lease terms would then go to the city council. They don't have purview over the design of the sign or the height or anything like that, just the lease terms.
Thank you. Any more discussion?
We're doing this because of the, what was the word, economic development. We're doing it for the money. And I don't see a lot of these signs in Redwood City. So if, for instance, Redwood City were to say, hey, we want in on that kind of income, could we start to be in a position where the signs bring in much less revenue, yet we're stuck with them forever?
It's possible that saturation in the marketplace could bring down overall revenues. However, our agreement is guaranteed. So our agreement guarantees the city a certain amount no matter what happens in the marketplace.
I see. And what's the contemplated term of the relationship?
20 years.
20 years. Does that mean we don't get new technology for 20 years?
They could decide to switch it out as new technology comes online, and they may wish to do that to be competitive in the marketplace.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no more, I'll move that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution for approval of the mitigated negative declaration associated with the proposed installation of a new LED billboard at 1119 Industrial Road and the removal of a billboard at 239 Old County Road based on the findings and for the reasons incorporated in the prepared initial study / mitigated negative declaration and the staff report.
I'll second.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Iacopone?
Yes.
Commissioner Dugan?
I would just say for the record that I do approve this, but with the understanding that this will be the last one that comes before us. If more come before us, my review of exactly where we stand vis-a-vis all the other communities up and down 101 is something I want to take a very hard look at.
And Chair Bradley?
Yes, but ditto to what Commissioner Duggan just said. So it passes.
Second motion?
One more motion.
I'll read one. I move that the Planning Commission approve the design review associated with the proposed installation of a new LED billboard at 1119 Industrial Road based on the findings and for the reasons incorporated in the staff report and as conditioned in the design review certificate.
I'll second.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Iacopone?
Yes.
Commissioner Dugan?
Yes.
And Chair Bradley?
Yes, but this is the last sign I'll vote for. Thank you all for coming. Next. Okay, good luck on your project. Next is announcements, reports.
No reports on recent City Council actions this evening.
Does the commission have any comments or announcements? I have one. I'd like the record to show our appreciation to Ms. Jill Lewis, who I understand has moved on to Washington, D.C. to, I hope, continue her planning career on the East Coast. I don't know if I need a second. These guys actually don't know her, but please do pass on the information.
We will.
Aye.
Anything else? If not,
Yes.
oh,
For the
thank you.
commission this evening, staff just would like to provide a brief update. At the next regular scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission, we are working to bring forward an amendment to the city's existing wireless telecommunications ordinance. There have been a number of somewhat recent and very recent actions made by the FCC, and whereby we are required to revise our ordinance to bring our ordinance in compliance with those changes. So I just wanted to give the commission the heads up on that, and we will have staff who is knowledgeable in the recent law, the changes in the law, be able to present and answer questions of the commission. In addition to that, we have not a billboard, but we do have a freeway-oriented sign, and our current code, the sign ordinance requires that whenever a sign is visible from Highway 101, that it be reviewed by the Planning Commission. So while not a billboard, there is a proposal for a new sign where it would be visible from Highway 101. So that will be brought forward to you. And then aside from that, I wanted to mention for the record that with respect to the ongoing efforts that have recently taken place over the last year to look at recommendations to revise development standards in the RS6 zoning district, the Planning Commission's recommendations that were made on September 17th will be presented to the City Council on Monday, October the 8th. The staff report to the City Council will be released later this week. Usually that occurs on Thursdays, but most definitely by Friday. That will be available. If any commissioners would like some assistance in getting a copy, staff can make sure that you do. Otherwise, it is available on the city's website for download. In relationship to that, I do want to mention, and this is a request from the city clerk's office, as some of you may already know, but there has been an invitation sent, an invitation from the city manager and the mayor to all planning commissioners and to all members of the Citizens Advisory Committee, also known as SHAC, Single Family House Advisory Committee, to participate and attend the city council hearing on Monday, October the 8th. So hopefully you all have received an invitation, and she asked that if you haven't yet RSVP'd, please do so, because there are some accommodations that will need to be made to make sure that we have the seating arranged in a way that works. So if you could please email Crystal with your RSVP, whether or not you can attend, that would be appreciated. And that is all I have for this evening.
Thank you for reminding us. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, could we get in our packet a copy of the materials and event that staff planned to present so we could pick them up?
And actually, that makes a lot of sense given you were invited. So we'll make sure that you get copies of the packet as well, and we'll place them in your normal pickup spot.
Thank you. And so telecommunications ordinance, is there a chance to get material on that sooner rather than later? It seems sort of new, and if you're looking for, let's say a vote on a specific recommendation, feels like it might be a little more complex and maybe a little more time to skim it, think about it, ask questions. I don't know where you are in developing material, but more time is better.
Well, we can see what we can do about releasing the staff report early. I mean, we're already working on that. We are prepared. We understand that there's an educational aspect to this because some of the commissioners are new and not everybody reads the wireless ordinance or is so familiar with it as we are, maybe some other sections of the municipal code, such as RS6, for example. So we will take that into consideration and do what we can to sort of assist the commission in reviewing the proposal.
Great, thank you.
I hope that the members of the Planning Commission can all be present, if possible, next Monday at the City Council meeting. I plan to be there, and we each get to talk 2 minutes, I think, they said.
Oh, is that right, Dave? We'll take turns, and we get our moment.
So thank you. I really appreciate the staff support.
Right?
Is that right? There'll be a short,
I think that
or is it
you'll
informal?
be given the opportunity to talk freely. I'm not exactly sure. That may have been for the public. Generally for the public, everybody's given 2 minutes, but I think they're really looking for reflections on, your consideration of the Shacks material, of your decision-making process with the FAR, listening to the public comments and things like that. So that's what they're looking for, and they'll probably ask questions. And so I'm not sure there would be a limitation on how much time you can talk for. Yeah.
Okay, I declare the meeting adjourned.